We're exercising real power. Many people think we are not humble. Be humble. And I'll say this, if you want an illustration of this, Christine and I were both in Ukraine the week before last. If we think we have it difficult, spend time with the Central Bank of Ukraine. Nothing.
Yeah. Thank you so much to everyone for a wonderful panel. Thank you.
U.S. Fed Chair Jay Powell was participating in a panel at the ECB Forum on Central Banking, the Sintra Forum, an annual event organized by the European Central Bank and is held in Sintra, Portugal. Francine Lacroix hosting a host of bank leaders from North America, Fed Chairman Jay Powell, Asia, and Europe as well. So getting a sense of central bank policy on a global basis. Emily Garfeo, Paul Sweeney, we're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live YouTube as well. This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Program. Looking at the markets here, we've got red and green on the screen. Let's get a reset here after that Francine Lacroix interview of the bank chairman. We'll go to John Tucker and a Bloomberg Business Flash. John.
All right, you guys. This Bloomberg Business Flash being brought to you by IBKR. Will the median new home sales price exceed $450,000 in June 2025? The yes was recently at 5%. Trade your prediction with IBKR Forecast Trader at ibkr.com/forecast. The last trading day for this contract, July 24th. After another record close for the S&P 500, the major stock averages mixed right now. You have 8 of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500. They're actually lower. Utilities and energy, the biggest decliners. Tesla is the worst performer in the index. They release sales figures tomorrow. And ahead of that, more back and forth. Elon Musk feud with President Trump heating up again. Trump even suggesting he'd look at deporting Elon Musk and ending government contracts with Musk's companies. Meantime, the earnings season, that starts in a couple of weeks, and Cameron Dawson at New Edge Wealth says investor expectations at this point may be too low.
I think that investors are conditioned to expect beats and optimism because we went into the first quarter expecting 7% growth and we got 12. This quarter, the street is expecting 4% growth.
Apple seems to be acknowledging it's behind in artificial intelligence. The company considering using an outside firm and their AI technology to power Siri. Right now, the S&P 500 12 points lower at 6192 on the index. That's down about 0.2%. The Dow up 272 points right now, and the Nasdaq 100 is 145 points lower. That is down 0.6%. The 10-year yield 4.25. That's up just about 3 basis points. The 2-year 5 basis points. That is at 3.76. Oh, and you know what today is?
What?
Bobby Bonilla Day.
Bobby Bonilla Day, that's right.
He's going to collect a check for $1.2 million. 2,000 the Mets agreed to buy out the remaining $5.9 million on his contract. But instead of paying him up front, they agreed to do this until he's like in his 70s.
Yeah.
So every July 1st, he gets this check.
I don't know what calculation they used to come up with that, but that does not work.
We call it a deferred contract. And the history of it is that the Mets, the owners at the time said, you know what, we have all these investments coming due, so why not? The investments were with, yes, one, Bernie Madoff. So, anyway, that's the history of that. We check the markets through all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Happy Bobby Bonilla Day.
John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Emily Garfeo from Bloomberg News, sitting in on Paul Sweeney. We're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers up until noon, Wall Street time, the Bloomberg Intelligence program. We're streaming live on YouTube as well. So head over to youtube.com/Bloomberg Live Podcast, and that's where you'll find us. We just heard Francine Lacroix, Bloomberg Television, London, interviewing a whole host of central bankers in Portugal. Looks like a beautiful town, Sintra. Just extraordinary looking. I just kind of Googled it. Pretty cool stuff there. But Fed Chairman Jay Powell, he says inflation's kind of moving as expected. Pretty happy with the economy. It's in, quote, a pretty good position. I'm looking at the bond market. Yields moving a little bit higher here. 10 years up about 2 basis points. 4.25%. It was as low as 4.18% earlier today. So a little bit of a lift in rates. Let's check in with Ira Jersey, Chief Interest Rate Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. Again, Ira, I didn't hear too much new from either Fed Chairman Jay Powell or the other central bankers, but the other central bankers are seems like they're committed for the most part to moving rates lower. What did you take away from this panel?
Yeah, overall, basically the trends that have been in place for the last 6 months seem like they're going to be in place for the next 6 months, and that's kind of the only thing that was kind of confirmed from this. You know, what's funny about this is the fourth public forum that we've heard Jay Powell speak in the last 2 weeks. So it was doubtful that you were going to get much new. I did think that there was a little discourse there when Francine asked everyone about if they would do the same thing that Jay Powell's doing in his place, and I thought Christine Lagarde's comment that yes, they definitely would, and you know, everyone was nodding their head in agreement. You know, I think it was an interesting acknowledgement. It must feel good for Jay Powell that at least his colleagues at other central banks thinks that the Fed at least is doing a decent job at their you know, trying to deal with their dual mandate, and that had to make him feel good.
Ira, did we learn anything new about just how Powell is thinking about the impact of tariffs on inflation and the potential path ahead for monetary policy?
Yeah, so he's been pretty clear the last couple of weeks, and if you go back and look at his Humphrey Hawkins testimony, the semi-annual monetary policy testimony from last week, as well as what he mentioned today, is that they do expect to see an effect of inflation on inflation from these tariffs starting this summer. And when you look at some of the data that we received from May, for example, it did suggest that there are certain segments of the market and certain goods sectors in particular where you're starting to see at least a turnaround and maybe a little uptick of inflation. You know, we'll get a bit clearer view of that in June, July, August, because remember, one thing is that in a lot of these sectors, there is a lead time, right? These aren't instantaneous hits to the prices that are input by importers. There's inventories that have to be drawn down at a certain price, and then, you know, now we'll start to really see over the next 2 or 3 months what that looks like. Now, interestingly, some of the work that we've been doing is looking at, okay, in aggregate, if you get a little increase in goods, but we wind up having these lower energy prices, will you wind up seeing that in the headline or even the core inflation measures? And the answer is maybe not. And I think that that's an interesting aspect of all of this, because we don't, in the U.S., with the exception of gasoline and energy, we don't buy a lot of goods really compared to the services that we consume.
Ira, I thought it was kind of interesting, Fed Chairman Jay Powell talking about the level of the U.S. debt. Calls it's the level of the debt is sustainable, but the path is not. How often do we hear the Fed kind of talk about the U.S. debt and deficits?
Since Alan Greenspan, every single Fed chair has said that exact same thing. Okay. And the thing is, when we looked at, you know, Alan Greenspan's day, we were at 30% debt to GDP. Today, we're at 100% debt to GDP, more or less. So, you know, we have seen a massive increase in the level of debt. You know, when you talk about the level of debt not being unsustainable, I think that also matters for what interest rate environment you're in, right? You can imagine a situation where if interest rates are 300 or 400 basis points higher, I'm not saying that we're going there. In fact, I don't think we will. But that means that there is the possibility of kind of a debt spiral where you wind up having to issue a lot more debt just to pay the interest on the debt. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. And this is a big reason why a lot of people are focused on will the bill that's currently going through the Senate really lower the deficit or not. And I think that's the real, it is a real worry, and I think we're getting to that tipping point where it is a big concern.
Ira, thanks so much for joining us. Ira Jersey, Chief U.S. Interest Rate Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about global shipping here. We've been talking a lot about that. And really, since the pandemic, when we really started to get knowledgeable, if you will, about the supply chains and where stuff comes from and where it goes and how it gets there, and how supply chains can be fragile. And now with all the geopolitical tensions in various parts of the world, global shipping and the threat to global shipping is once again at the forefront. And we're going to check in with Stamatis Tsantanis. He is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Synergy Maritime, and that is a NASDAQ-listed security company. SHIP is the great symbol there. Stamatis, thanks so much for joining us here. A lot of hotspots in the world. You think about the Strait of Hormuz. We've been hearing about that over the last several weeks. Of course, what's happening in the Baltics with Ukraine. How would you characterize the current global shipping business these days?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. It is indeed quite challenging. I mean, we've had COVID, and then we had the pretty much closure of the Red Sea because of the Houthis, and then everything became even more challenging with the Hormuz or the potential closure of that. So, you know, we tend to navigate all these geopolitical challenges quite successfully so far. You know, it's all about infrastructure. I mean, what's going on right now and whatever we believe to be the normalization of whatever conflict in the Middle East, hopefully, that is going to lead to a very big infrastructure boom in the area, which is already pretty much started and booming. And I believe that this is going to help shipping, especially dry bulk that we operate in, very, very much.
Stamatis, in addition to your role at Synergy, you're also the founder and chairman and CEO of United Maritime Corporation. Together, you have a total of 25 ships in the ocean. I'm wondering if you had to reroute any shipping routes in the wake of the latest Middle East tensions.
Well, we have been rerouting a lot of our ships. About a third of our fleet has been rerouting already to avoid the Red Sea, which it was kind of underplayed how important that passage has been for global shipping, especially for big bulkers like we do. We were transporting a lot of coal from Australia to Europe because of the energy needs. And we did a lot of coal cargoes from Baltimore, USA to the west coast of India. All of this routing were from the Red Sea. Now we're going around the Cape of Good Hope. So unfortunately, that means more ton miles, more expensive in bunkers, more expensive for the consumer, and that adds a lot of additional CO2 emissions to the environment. Let's not forget about that as well.
Stamatis, talk to us about a global economy that's now being influenced by tariffs across the globe here. How has that impacted maybe your business, the business of your customers?
Well, nothing has happened so far. Everything is pretty much priced in. The world had a big alarm shock back in 2016, 2017, with the initial phase and threat by the first term of President Trump back in the day. Nowadays, everything is pretty much priced in. So, you know, people was kind of expecting that, and we didn't see any disruption so far. What we have been seeing is all the geopolitical turmoil that has affected, for the time being, long-term buyers of raw materials like iron ore and coal. But I believe this is going to normalize as well, and we will come back to a very, very strong trading environment once again.
How would you assess then right now just the volume of shipping? A couple weeks ago, right after Trump announced the initial tariffs, there were a lot of concerns on Wall Street that shipping was going to drop, shelves were going to be empty. Do you think those fears were overblown in hindsight?
Well, yes. I mean, that initial plan on Liberation Day was pretty much, I'm not so sure how to characterize that, but of course it caught the world into a big shock. Nobody was expecting that all these 60, 70, 80, 90% global tariffs were going to go through. And it appeared to be that, you know, after the initial shock of the first few weeks, things kind of normalized. So there are numerous deals happening with each individual country or continent or European Union or you name it. And I believe that we're very, very close to pretty much unwinding all the trouble that we saw with, with that Liberation Day. Of course, please be reminded that global trade has been continuing like nothing has happened. No, material tariffs have been imposed so far. So far it's been business as usual. We haven't really seen any disruptions in respect of that. It was more psychological, the impact, rather than anything material.
Stamatis, how does your company compete with some of the, the big global monster kind of shipping companies like, the Moller, Maersk and things like that? How do you guys compete?
Well, it's a totally different industry. They operate mostly in the consumer industry because they transport containers. We are doing more bulk iron ore, coal, and bauxite, which is very, very important in the infrastructure growth of the world. Right now, we have trillions of dollars of global infrastructure being committed and fully funded. So this is going through, especially in the Middle East. As you know, President Trump has at least 7 or 8 new buildings being built in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, and all this place over there. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar projects. And I believe that the transportation of iron ore, coal, and bauxite will help in all this massive infrastructure that we have been experiencing and all of these things going on right now. So we do not really support the consumer needs of the US or Europe, but we do support substantially the transportation needs for infrastructure in various parts of the world. That's what we do.
Fascinating story. Thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time, Stamatis Tsantanis. He's the chairman and chief executive officer of Synergy Maritime, also the founder, chairman, and CEO of United Maritime Corporation. Both of those are publicly traded companies. Talk about the global shipping business, and infrastructure is a big part of their growth story. Looking at the S&P 500, here we are off 18 points. The Dow's up 240 points. That's a 0.5%, but the Nasdaq's down 190 points. So red and green on the screen, no real direction there. We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Iran juga kayak Israel. Oh, nggak ada gas neutron. Kalau udah gini, kalau udah itu ya bilang, kalau pulangnya malam pindah aja. Soalnya ibu kepikiran kalau kamu takutnya masih pulang, jadi langsung bilang pindah aja. Kalau udah, walaupun aku bilangnya, walaupun aku bilang tapi itu kalau malam banget ya. Index updates. Nikkei to 39,000.
You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Emily DeFeo, Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. So head over to that internet thing and go search Bloomberg Live Podcast on YouTube. That's where you'll find us. F1, the movie, I want to see this thing. I did not see it yet, but it had a good U.S. box office, even better international box office. Emily, did you see it?
No, but it has a star-studded lineup.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt is the main star here.
I'm going to wait for the book to come out.
You're going to wait for the book to come out. John
Okay.
Tucker. And that's good news for Apple because they produced the movie. It's good news for, I guess, Brad Pitt, but maybe it's good news for F1 in general. Geetha Ranganathan joins us. She's a U.S. media analyst, and she's got an interesting angle here. Geetha, first, let's just talk about the movie. That's good to see a successful movie in the movie theaters these days. I guess the movie theater companies are pretty happy.
Very happy, Paul. So this was obviously, as you just pointed out, a big success story for Apple. They've been dabbling in these theatrical films for quite a bit now, but none of their movies have had this much of a success. So this is really good news, and I think it kind of really emboldens them with respect to their strategy. So definitely movie theaters are happy. And the other point that I'd like to make is, more than 20 to 25% of the total box office actually. So this is really good news for the exhibitors, because the premium large format, that whole thing about going to the theater to experience the movie is really working.
Okay, so your latest note is about how this F1 movie here from Apple is going to jolt, you say, lackluster bidding for the Formula One rights in the US. Just give us a little bit of context here, the landscape of rights for Formula One, who currently has the rights, when does that expire, and just put into context kind of the current bidding right now.
Sure, Emily. So right now, Formula One, as you know, is a global sports, global media property. In the US, the rights to distribute Formula One content is owned by Disney's ESPN. So they have rights that go through the end of this year, through the end of 2025. They're currently paying about $85 million a year. That's up from their last negotiation cycle when they were paying only about $5 million. So it's up to $85 million. But what F1 is saying is that this is such an interesting property. This is, a hot property. You should be paying up for it. And they are really looking for something upwards of about 150 to 160 million. And I'm not so sure ESPN wants to pay that much money. So it's really, price is really a sticking point here. And it looks like we've hit a little bit of a stalemate, because, when you kind of think about it, yes, this is a property. By the way, this F1 really kind of shot into the limelight in the US, Emily and Paul, with the Netflix Drive Survive series. Now, Netflix has been hugely actually instrumental in kind of driving this surge in popularity. So everybody was kind of wondering whether Netflix or, maybe another streamer like an Amazon would kind of come in and bid for the rights. But I think what we're seeing with a lot of these streaming platforms is that they want global rights. These are all global streaming platforms. They want rights to distribute this content in all markets, and they're not going to be able to get that right now.
Because Formula One, who's their European overs? Is that Warner Brothers? Who distributes?
Sky. Sky actually distributes them in most markets. So, Ireland, UK, Germany, Italy, again, France, Spain, they all have a little bit different, distributors, but Sky is a very big one across Europe.
Wouldn't Apple be an obvious choice to partner up and, get the rights to Formula One because they just made this big blockbuster hit about Formula One?
You would think so, but it's been a little bit of again, it's hard to actually figure out what Apple is thinking here. One thing that Apple doesn't have, which both Amazon and Netflix have, is scale. So Netflix has well over 300 million global subscribers. Amazon probably has close to about 300 million as well on their video streaming service. Apple, on the other hand, has probably less than 50 million. So they don't necessarily have the scale to support it. And remember, there are a few other things with the Formula One property. You don't have a lot of advertising inventory necessarily. So again, that's something that doesn't necessarily appeal to streamers, especially because all of these different streaming platforms are really trying to build out their ad business. Formula One doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. But you're absolutely right. Apple could be a very interested party down the road.
And for those who care, one can actually invest directly in Formula One. It is a publicly traded company. FWONK, I like, Formula One K. It's owned by John Malone and Liberty Media, so there's a million different share classes out there. But Formula One, Geetha, I mean, under John Malone's leadership, they've done a good job of increasing rights, sporting rights, and sponsorships and all that kind of stuff, making it actually profitable.
Very profitable, Paul, and they've done a fantastic job with the media rights. Again, they've really capitalized on this huge surge in popularity, because remember, F1 was really more of a European, really not so big in America, but they've really kind of capitalized on this huge momentum in the United States. And you're absolutely right. They've added a whole lot of races, made it a year-round calendar, lots of sponsorship money. So they've done a very good job with this new Liberty Media management team.
Geetha, real quick while we got you 30 seconds. Are people feeling better about Disney these days?
They absolutely are. So one of the things that we were so worried about was the theme parks and whether, we were going to see a slowdown there because just general economic uncertainty. Also Epic, which is the Comcast property opening in Florida.
Oh, right.
But so far we haven't seen any signs of a slowdown. So things are looking actually pretty good for Disney.
All right, stock's up 10% this year, better than the market. Geetha Ranganathan, she covers all the global media stuff for Bloomberg Intelligence, zooming in from Princeton, New Jersey. Again, Formula One stock, the movie opened last week, really good box office, not crazy good, but very good. And very good international, got great reviews, so people think it might have legs, is what they say in the business over the following weeks here. So we'll see how that does for Apple and see what it means for the Formula One racing circuit. S&P 500 minus 17 points, the Dow up 200 points, the Nasdaq down 200 points. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. high yield. The market's telling me, here's another AI play. Just bid it, buy it. One person's chaos is another person's animal spirits.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business. These are two big-time blue-chip companies. Are people just too exuberant out there?
Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, coming up in this hour, we're going to check in with Mike Dorning, Bloomberg News. He's down in D.C. We've got the latest headlines coming out of there. I think we might have a tax and spend bill. I'm not sure what's going on with Elon Musk. Mandeep Singh, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Tech Analyst on the latest tech news of the day. I want to ask him about Apple and the AI story. To me, that's huge. Apple may consider almost kind of farming out its AI capabilities to somebody else. You just don't see that almost ever, it seems like. Michael McKee's going to join us here, Bloomberg International Economics and Policy Analyst, get his thoughts on Powell's ECB commentary. And then Rania Setham, she's a managing partner at Setham Law Group, on ICE raids and how it's affecting different industries and different companies across the industry. So we got a lot to cover in the coming hour. We're going to kick it all off with a Bloomberg Business Flash with John Tucker.
All right, and this Bloomberg Business Flash is being brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Major stock averages mixed right now, and the leaders, they belong to the casino stocks like Wynn Resorts. Those shares up 8.2%. This comes after the Macau gaming revenue growth rate soared to 19% for the month of June. Bond yields, they're rising after an unexpected rise in job openings, so that kind of dims the outlook for the Federal Reserve to cut rates. And that is also keeping a lid on stocks. And as traders begin the second half of the year, Tom Porcelli, the chief U.S. economist at PGIM, sees growth trailing off.
Think about it. Yields are lower, equity prices are higher, and overcrowded dollars sold off a bit. It was all good, and there was so much volatility during the quarter that for an active manager, you had a lot of opportunity to move positions around. So I would love that quarter over again. We're not going to get it.
Right now, the S&P 500, 13 points lower after the record close yesterday, 61.91 on the index, down 0.2%. The Nasdaq 100 down 196 points. That's down about 0.9%. And the Dow, again, boosted by those casino stocks right now, up 304 points, a rise of 0.7%. 10-year yield, 3 basis points higher. That's at 426. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Emily and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Emily Grafego, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City, streaming live on YouTube as well. I did not know about Sintra, Portugal before today, so I Googled it. Now it is on my bucket list. I would love to go there. It looks spectacular. Francine Lacroix is in Sintra, Portugal. She is Bloomberg News Editor-at-Large, host of The Pulse on Bloomberg Television, and she hosted a panel today. Some of the leading central bankers in the world, including Fed Chairman Jay Powell, the ECB, the European, everybody was there. Francine, thanks so much for joining us from lovely Sintra, Portugal. That was a high-powered panel you were hosting. What did you take away from it?
Yeah, it wasn't. Well, first of all, you're absolutely
Yang
right.
baru,
It seems
baru,
beautiful,
baru.
and also, Paul, good news. It has like a microclimate, so everything else is really hot. And here we have a nice breeze, which is not why central bankers come here every year, but certainly just brings people together. And the panel was interesting. So you had 5 of the world's most important central bankers, and look, there are different economies that they have to deal with. There are different cycles. Some have inflation to worry about. Some actually cut interest rates by so much, then they're a much better place. And you have Bank of Japan looking at raising interest rates. What struck me was first the amount of uncertainty, and I know we talk about this every day on your show, you talk about it every day. It's trade tariffs, it's of course concerns over fragmentation and the politizations of central banks. And so it's just very difficult for these central bankers to give us a view of how they expect interest rates to go. It's also very difficult for them to just try and understand what inflation will do. So that perspective for me was really interesting on how they model the future, which should help them in making the right decision on what they do with interest rates.
Francine, what are the takeaways about what these central bank leaders said about inflation? It seemed like Christine Lagarde at least was taking somewhat of a victory lap. I know she said that it wasn't mission accomplished, but she did seem pretty positive on the inflation outlook there.
Yeah, Emily, so you had Bank of Japan, you have the ECB there, you had, of course, Jay Powell of the Fed, you had Bank of Korea, and you have the Bank of England. And again, when you talk about inflation, they're all very different. So the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, the governor there, was saying, look, you can look through inflation. We have shocks. We had shocks because of COVID, then you have because of the trade tensions, and then you had also a couple of days where oil prices were really all over the place. But he wants to look through some of the tensions with inflation. Look, if you look at all the 4 big central banks, and Bank of Korea, that's a small open economy, doesn't have a reserve currency, so could maybe talk more freely. It's definitely, it's clear that the ECB has done a great job so far. Now, she did say, Christine Lagarde, don't cry victory yet. But if you look at inflation, they cut by 8 times, and inflation today is right on target. So we had data this morning, and there was a worry that inflation from extremely high just 3 quarters ago would undershoot, so go below the 2% target, but right now it's broadly in line. I guess the most interesting bit when you talk about inflation is that it's not going to be linear. You're going to have shocks that come from supply shocks that could come out of nowhere because of politics and some of the wars that we're seeing around the world. And so what they see is basically they look at scenarios. So instead of telling you, Emily, look, inflation is now at 2%, go to 2.4% and 2.7%, or vice versa, they say, look, if the price of oil does this, the inflation pattern could do this. And so it's much more Fed-like style, trying to figure out what these shocks mean for their future inflation outlook and therefore for monetary policy.
Francine, thank you so much for a few minutes of your time. I really appreciate getting the wrap up there. Francine Lacroix, Bloomberg Television. She's in Sintra, Portugal, where she hosted a panel of some of the leading central bankers around the world today. Just fascinating. If you didn't see it, go check it out on Bloomberg.com. Let's get back down to Washington, D.C. A lot of action down there from our good friends in the Senate. Now it looks like this spending bill is going to be tossed back to the House. Mike Dorning, he's on top of it. He's a Capitol Influence deputy team leader for Bloomberg News in D.C. Mike, Senator Thune suggesting the Republicans may have a deal. What do we know?
Well, they appear to have a written out deal, and they were just showing it to the parliamentarian for the Senate to make sure all the provisions would work and be able to be passed by majority vote. So one of our correspondents who's actually in the Senate chamber in the balcony above was watching her go over it with a pen. So they're sort of shuttling back and forth between there and Thune's office, and they've brought the senators in. So very soon they'll do an amendment to kind of just change everything to capture that final deal and then vote on it. So there could be a vote coming very soon, and the Republican leader says he believes he has the votes.
What does Wall Street need to be paying attention to here in this latest iteration of the bill? Is there anything kind of specific to markets or something investors should be watching?
So mostly these tweaks have to do with clean energy, tax credit phase-outs, and Medicaid funding cuts. But we're hearing that and that one of the tweaks may be involve the extra excise tax they were going to put on solar and wind. So here, if you're a clean energy investor, this final deal may give you a little more clarity on how hard this bill hits that sector.
We went to bed last night. We woke up this morning, Mike, thinking that there were 7 or 8 holdouts there, potentially imperiling this deal. Do we know what happened to them?
Well, this is something, aside from 2 hardcore holdouts on the Republican side, one senator who doesn't want to raise an extra $5 trillion for the debt limit, which is part of this, and another, a senator who just thinks this goes too far with Medicaid cuts. All of the rest really wanted to get to a deal. They basically favored the bill. So it was just a question of addressing some holdouts who thought, hey, we're not cutting enough from the social safety net, and we're not cutting the clean energy tax credits out fast enough. And some others who were like, oh, you're doing too many Medicaid cuts and you're cutting out the clean energy tax credits too fast. So they were just kind of trying to work out those differences and get them on board. We'll see how they wound up doing that. But you kind of knew all along they would figure out a way.
Mike, help us understand, once the Senate votes on this goes back to the House, then what happens, considering, we have a holiday coming up? What's the timeline here for the progress?
So what they want to do is just have the House accept the Senate changes so that President Trump can sign it on July 4th. It's possible the House might not go along. On the one hand, there's some hardcore fiscal conservatives who don't like the fact that the Senate bill creates a lot more debt for the country than the House bill. They both involve big debt increases, but the Senate has a bigger debt increase because they found a way to change the rules so that they don't have to pay as much attention to the debt. Also, there's one of the lawmakers from New York wasn't happy with the SALT deal on the state and local tax deduction. So he said, I'm not getting enough, I'm not going to vote for this bill. And remember, it only passed by 1 vote in the House. So if they can't figure out a way around these holdouts, they could be in trouble. But you can bet that Donald Trump and the House leaders will be cranking up the pressure on these people to just cave and go along.
Last thing, Mike, politically, this could be risky for the Republicans, because if I'm a Democrat running, I just say, hey, these guys just took away your Medicaid, they increased the national debt, blah, blah, blah. You could make some arguments here that this is not a great deal for the average American.
Yes, and a lot of the polling ahead of time suggests it's not that popular because it's basically a tax cut that delivers a lot of benefits for wealthier people and takes away a lot of money from poorer people. But they are working this hard. And remember, the person who has the best megaphone always is the president and his party to try to shape perceptions. And there's no one who's better at selling than Donald Trump. So he's going to start with like a big push to convince people that this is a good or good enough thing to try to blunt the Democrats' message going into the midterms.
Mike, thanks so much for your reporting. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you soon. Mike Dorning, Capitol Influence Deputy Team Leader for Bloomberg News. He's down there in Washington, D.C., along with the team, trying to stay on top of this big tax and spending bill. I tell you, one of the biggest pieces of news for me today, or it came out yesterday, Apple. I mean, here's the Bloomberg headline. Apple weighs using outside AI power to power Siri in a major shift. This is Apple saying, we kind of can't get this AI thing going, so we'll let somebody else do it for us. To me, that was shocking. Stock market, like the stock's up a couple of % today, but I need to figure out what's going on here. So I said, Mandeep Singh, Bloomberg Intelligence, Senior Tech Analyst, I need you in our studio here. Mandeep, to me, this seemed big.
Yes.
I mean, Apple, they got the new headquarters. They got like a gajillion scientists. They're saying we can't really get AI as well as we want it, as quickly as we want it, so we'll maybe use somebody outside?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember at WWDC, all they showcased was that new liquid glass interface. There was no mention of AI. So it was pretty obvious that they had nothing new to showcase from an LLM perspective. And look, given the astronomical rise of ChatGPT and how it's taken the user and engagement share, I mean, everyone is looking to use that kind of functionality on the apps that live within the Apple ecosystem, whether it's your email, your calendar, your contacts, like the photos that are stored on iCloud. You have to ask yourself, why can't Apple deploy AI in a similar fashion where I can engage in a ChatGPT type format? And so that's the use case here. Obviously, Apple's own LLM efforts have gone nowhere because they have, frankly speaking, underinvested. I mean, look at their CapEx versus all the other hyperscalers. They're spending $80 billion. Apple is spending $10 billion. So it's just not the same level of investment. And they underappreciated how transformational this generative AI LLM wave is going to be. And now they are partnering with an Anthropic or OpenAI. I think Anthropic makes more sense to me, because OpenAI has clearly said they have their own hardware ambitions. And to my mind, Anthropic is an enterprise-focused player. They have already partnered with Amazon. And in this case, they probably will partner with Apple as well.
And as Paul mentioned, the stock market, it wasn't disappointed in this news. The stock was up yesterday when Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, wrote the story, which I do think it came out.
Everything he breaks.
Yes, he does break everything.
Yeah.
I think the story came after the close, but still, the stock is higher today. So this is good. I mean, talk a little bit more about the partnerships, because if Anthropic is partnering with Amazon as well, like, this isn't really an exclusive deal that they're doing. Apple's just going to have the same AI as all the other tech companies?
But Apple controls the distribution across their iOS devices, and whether it's your tablet or your smartphone or Mac PCs, it's the Apple iOS ecosystem. So if Anthropic's LLM is natively integrated, I mean, look at how much Microsoft has benefited from OpenAI's partnership. Microsoft doesn't have their own LLM. The fact that they have risen so much is because of the OpenAI partnership. So partnership isn't a bad thing for Apple. And in this case, clearly Anthropic has a very good LLM on the tech side. Maybe you could argue in terms of multimodality, OpenAI and Google are ahead. But for a text LLM, Anthropic's performance is comparable, at par with the frontier models, and that's where it makes a ton of sense that they use Anthropic.
30 seconds. Can I think about this announcement similar to Apple saying we're going to use Google for search?
Yeah, and part of the reason why there is no mention of Google here is because of that antitrust case that's pending. So clearly what Apple wants to signal is they don't want to do anything with Google right now, given that monopoly lawsuit and the $20+ billion of payment from Google to Apple. And right now they are really diversifying their exposure to these LLM players. They could have very well used an LLM. And I wouldn't be surprised down the line, once this DOJ case is resolved, and if it works out fine, they may end up using Google's LLM as well. Apple's main goal here is to have as many LLM partners and really not depend on just one, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic. They want 5 players, and I think they would be willing to use anyone.
All right. I thought it was a big deal. But again, I kind of liken it to this whole search thing. We'll do search with Google. If they have better search, we'll use that. So on our phones. Mandeep Singh, he breaks it down for us, as he always does. Mandeep Singh, senior tech analyst, Bloomberg Intelligence. He kind of runs it with Anurag Rana. They kind of run our global technology team. We've got analysts in Europe, North America, and Asia covering the global tech industry, because that is a driver of the value in these markets. S&P off 21 points. This is
Apa kasih? Apa? Hah? Apa? Ngesel. Lagi dah, ngesel sekarang dah. Hah? Masak dulu, sudah masak guys. Aku nggak apa-apa, aku sekarang. Kalau tidak percaya. Kamu jadi MC-nya. Tidak, aku DJ. Tidak, nah, jadi kamu tinggal buat mau. Hari doang kan? Ismail, no? Ya mau lu, gas. No drugs kan? Ya kalau kamu minum, nanti kita kamu. Nanti kalau mungkin udah usah udah. Oh, kapan? Iya, kapan? Besok.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses, Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitments. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Casino stocks, let's start there. They're the biggest gainers as a group after figures from Macau show that gambling revenue was pretty solid. Wynn Resorts, the best performing stock right now in the S&P 500. Those shares up 8.2%. Now, weighing on the major averages, also the economic data today. There was an unexpected rise in the number of job openings. So that's good, right? Well, from an investor's perspective, that good news actually reduces the chance of a Fed rate cut. So investors like rate cuts more than they do job openings. Tesla, right now, the worst performing stock in the S&P 500. Here they go again. Elon Musk and President Trump trading barbs over the tax cut bill. The president, at one point, in response to a question, even pondering deporting Elon Musk. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Emily and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Emily Garfeo, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Kind of got a mixed market out there, Emily. I think, we heard some economic data came out today, but we're really waiting on, I think, the jobs day on Thursday, not Friday, which it usually is Friday, but it's Thursday because we're off on Friday for July 4th. But the JOLTS number came out higher than expected, as John's been reporting here. 7.8 million. I mean, I don't know. It just feels like the job market remains pretty steady. And I guess the narrative we're hearing is if you got a job, you're in pretty good shape.
Right.
If you don't have a job, it's harder than it's been over the last several years to find one because people aren't generally quitting. And the layoff level came in lower than expected, the JOLTS layoff level here. So people have their jobs are staying with them. But if you're looking for a job, maybe a little bit tougher than it used to be.
And we did see yields moving up higher. It seemed like at that, 10 o'clock hour when the numbers came out, but it maybe also was in reaction to all those central bankers, Powell kind of not really saying much about when the next rate cut is going to be, but came in this morning and traders were saying, almost one cut priced in for that July 30th meeting.
Yeah, exactly. I also look at U.S. auto sales. People kind of are rushing out, and I have to admit, I was one of them who rushed out to buy a vehicle. or lease a vehicle for my youngest offspring who needs one in California. I was
great
told.
dad.
Yeah,
I know.
wait.
None of his other siblings got a car, so I caught a lot of grief from the older siblings. But I'm like, hey, the dude, he's the youngest.
Was it
youngest
new?
always gets spoiled. I was the youngest. I was spoiled. So yes, but he's out in California at college, needs one. Now here's the thing. They say, oh, the gas is so expensive out there that he and his mother convinced me to get a hybrid because the gas is expensive. So we now own a hybrid. So I don't know what to do about that. But a lot of economic data out today and more to go later this week. So we check in with Michael McKee. He covers all that economic stuff. He paid attention in economics class. I might have skipped out a few times to play golf at Duke. I can't confirm or deny that.
Yeah,
so,
I didn't
Mike,
do
what'd you
too
make
well.
of some of the economic data? The ISM still showing some struggles there on the manufacturing side.
ISM showing some struggles, still below 50, 49 even. A little bit of a rise, but basically that was driven by a rise in production. It just barely got over 50, which most analysts are attributing to maybe some inventory rebuilding. Inventories went up a little bit, so not really a huge sign that manufacturing is coming back. And we did see the employment number fall to 45, so that is a sign, a negative sign for Thursday's payroll report probably. And of course the prices paid index, which everybody watches, rose a touch to 69.7. So we have a little bit of more inflation in the report and a little bit less employment. That's not going to be seen as a good omen for the Fed. But the JOLTS numbers came in surprisingly strong. Job openings were up by about 300,000. The quits rate went up to 2.1%. Now, these are May numbers, so they're a little bit behind, but the trend there has been surprisingly strong. There are still a lot of, at least companies are saying there's a lot of jobs out there. Whether they're actually going to hire people or not, I guess we'll find out on Thursday.
For Thursday, what are you watching in terms of the unemployment rate? That number, 4.2%. How important is that right now as traders kind of think through, are we going to get that July rate cut? Is there a level that would prompt it?
Well, I don't think we could hit the level. You'd need something in the 4.5, 4.6 rate, a huge jump in unemployment for the majority of the Fed to decide they wanted to do something in July. But everybody's watching the unemployment rate. The Fed looks at it as a sign of a symbol of the overall economy, because if the economy is slowing, companies are going to cut people. But we're going to have to look under the hood and see why the unemployment rate is forecast to go up by 1/10, why that might happen. Because if we have no additions to the labor force because the president has cut off all immigration, then the unemployment rate is going to stay lower than it otherwise would. So we'll have to see what the components of unemployment are and whether that's any concern for the Fed.
So the survey number for Thursday is 110,000 non-farm payrolls. The whisper number, WHIS GO, is lower than that, about 100,000. Is there a number that the street would go, oh, that's not good? I mean, we're trending down in these.
Yeah, I think if you get below 100, the street will be starting to worry. It would depend on how we get there. You know, what jobs are not hiring, and whether unemployment goes up at the same time. What happens to the household survey employment numbers? Do they also fall significantly? The street is at this point, I think, trying to decide whether it really wants to put a bet on a July move or not. So any numbers that would push them in that direction, and this is only going to be the first one. We still have to have the CPI come in the middle of the month. So I'm not sure how much reaction you get to a really slow number. Now, if you get a negative number or very close to a negative number, then people are going to definitely start to say the Fed needs to do something, whether the Fed agrees or not.
They're going to come home from the beach because this is all coming on July 3rd, right?
Yep.
So it might be a low volume day in the market, but still, economists
it's an
watching.
early close, so everybody on July 3rd. So everybody's
the equity market's closed at 1
Everybody
o'clock?
comes in. We get the
1
numbers.
o'clock, yeah.
1 o'clock.
Yeah, we get the numbers at 8:30, 8:35. Everybody's got their trades in, and Highway 22 out to the Hamptons is like completely gridlocked.
Oh, don't ask me about my hands.
So
Never going back.
You know what's going to happen.
No, thank you. My next contract's going to have the helicopter clause in there. Anytime they want me to go out there, I have to be with a helicopter. And I think I know a guy, too.
I was thinking, based on your previous discussion, that Emily is going to put in to be adopted by you.
Yes.
Exactly.
And maybe you don't ask for a car, you ask for a helicopter.
Ask for a helicopter. Speaking of luxuries, Sintra, Portugal, have you ever been?
I have not been to that meeting. I would like to go sometime, but I think if I were invited, they wouldn't hold it.
Exactly. So, anything you heard from the central bankers that got your attention today? Francine was interviewing that panel.
Nothing really new. Powell was asked about July, and he said it's too early to decide, but a lot of members of the Open Market Committee aren't in favor of it. He left the door open but didn't suggest that he was thinking of that. And he parried another question on his relationship with the president, saying, I'm just trying to do my job. It sounded like a Western movie, just doing my job.
Well, I like the question that Francine asked, is there, to the whole panel, what keeps you up at night? And they all kind of laughed to themselves because it's probably what keeps everybody up at night, which is what is our president going to tweet and how is it going to impact the markets?
He said, I've got 10 months left. I want to bequeath to my successor a good economy, and what keeps me up at night is how am I going to do that? The other interesting thing was when he said not focused on the president, I'm just doing my job and doing what needs to be done. A little bit later, Christine Lagarde, the ECB president, said, I wouldn't do a thing differently from what Jay Powell is doing, which got a round of applause from people.
It was interesting also that, like typical Powell fashion, he's kind of dodging the question of who's going to be the next Fed chair and when is that actually going to happen? Because obviously there's been a lot of talk that maybe it would come sooner than Powell, the end of Powell's term. But there was nothing really new that we learned there.
No, nothing. He's giving the same answers to everything. And he was asked, would he stay on as governor if he's no longer chair? And he said, dodged that again, saying as he did the last two times he was asked, that I have nothing for you on that.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Michael McKee, International Economics and Policy Correspondent for Bloomberg News. Let's check in with RJ Gallo, Senior Portfolio Manager and Head of the Municipal Bond Group of Federated Hermes. RJ, we've got some economic data this week. We heard from Fed Chairman Jay Powell today. How are you guys thinking about the overall fixed income market these days? Where are the opportunities? Where are the risks?
Well, I think, first of all, the opportunities, yields have reset so much higher compared to recent years, and we've probably had to be a little bit more patient with this than we would like. But once the income has been returned to the fixed income asset class with, the 10-year Treasury yield being well in the 4 to 5% range really for a while now, you have opportunity for investors to diversify their overall portfolios back into fixed income, not fearing sort of the sharp duration price loss that we saw during the inflation spike and the Fed's efforts to fight it. Sadly, I think we've had to be a little bit more patient than we might like. But if you look on a year-to-date basis, the aggregate index, the Bloomberg aggregate index is now posting a total return. It's just about 4%. Treasuries are just below that. So the idea that income is your friend again and offers some diversification from the much more volatile corners of the market. We like bonds. We think bonds are attractive. From a duration standpoint, we've basically been neutral to leaning a little long during the year, expecting eventually that yields will come down as the economy slows and the Fed has to eventually layer in a few more eases as the calendar ticks by towards year end.
RJ, got about 30 seconds left. How about the municipal bond business? That's my favorite. I love municipal bonds. How do you guys think about the muni market?
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because on a year-to-date basis, munis have sharply underperformed. There's been a record year of issuance. We're at a record pace for new bond issuance from state and local governments and all kinds of muni issuers. That's one key factor. The second factor is we had been very rich at the end of last year. So we started off from a valuation standpoint just too darn Rich, and there's been a bit of a relative value correction. The year-to-date performance on munis is a lot weaker. It's basically zero on a diversified long-term index, just about 17 basis points negative. We don't think that will last. Munis are probably going to start to improve into the second half of next year as the issuance slows down and people get more attracted to higher yields that are out there.
All right, RJ, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Too short of a time. We'll get you back longer next time. RJ Gallo, Senior Portfolio Manager and Head of the Municipal Bond Group at Federated Hermes. Looking at that bond market, the 10-year Treasury, it's off 8/30 seconds, pushing the yield up about 3 basis points to 4.25%. We'll keep an eye on that. Bloomberg Dollar Index, weaker, slightly weaker again today. We'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Sudah profit berapa kalian guys? Sudah profit berjuta. Kalau sudah profit berjuta kalian guys. Yang ditanya. Ya mau jadi. Ya. Mau tahu kita tahu deh. むように。
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Right now, the major averages, they are mixed. Treasury yields, we'll start there. They're rising. The 10-year is about 4 basis points higher. The 2-year, more policy reactive, that's just about 6 basis points higher. This comes after the better-than-expected job openings report. So that seemed to reduce the odds of a Fed rate cut. That's what's weighing on stocks right now. Casino stocks, they're actually among the best performers. That is helping give a lift to the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And you have Wynn Resorts' best performing stock in the S&P 500. That's up 8.3%. So that brings us to the worst performer in the S&P 500. That would be Tesla. Those shares down close to 5%. The war of words between Elon Musk, President Trump heats up again. Tesla sales figures, they're out tomorrow as well. Julian Emanuel at Evercore ISI, he sees reason for investor optimism.
Obviously, the 2025 picture remains in flux, and we're going to find that out in a couple of weeks when earnings season starts. But in general, the whole narrative of the economy having avoided a recession is a reasonably positive backdrop.
The S&P 500, 18 points lower. That's down 0.3% after yesterday's record. 6186 on the index. The Dow up close to 400 points. That's a rise of 0.9%. The Nasdaq 100, 253 points higher on those higher yields, down 1.1%. Cinemax Holdings USA, owner of CMX Cinemas, filing for bankruptcy. This is the second time they've done this in 5 years. The latest of a laundry list of movie theater closures and debt restructurings after the rise of streaming media. And, you know, things changed after COVID, so that didn't help. How hot is it? I'll ask the question.
How hot is it, John?
In Europe. Actually, I'm supposed to say, it's hot out there, and you're supposed to say, how hot is it, John? The top of the Eiffel Tower is going to be shut to visitors over the next couple of days because temperatures in Paris are climbing as high as 105.8 degrees Fahrenheit. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Emily and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Emily Graffeo, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. A story just popped up on the Bloomberg terminal that got my attention here, being in New York City. New York City immigration arrests jumped 31%, putting Sanctuary City to test. A perfect time to check in with our next guest, Rania Sedham, managing partner at the Sedham Law Group, joining us here in studio. ICE agents are out across the country detaining, undocumented workers. How does this take place? How does it occur? What's the strategy been so far?
I'm not sure what strategy, they're employing, but I can tell you, the mechanics of it. I mean, they literally come into the workplace, and sometimes they present a warrant or a subpoena, and sometimes they don't. And there's no warrant or subpoena necessary if it's a public place. So any retail establishment, a hotel lobby, places where you don't otherwise need permission to enter.
And you're representing these businesses, right? These retail establishments in certain cases, right?
Yes.
What are they currently asking for? What do they need assistance on? What are you currently advising them to do?
Well, they don't know what to do, right? A lot of times, whether or not an employee is documented, we won't talk about that, but whether or not they are, you develop a relationship with the individual and you feel badly and you want to protect them. But, the rule is clear. If there is a warrant or a subpoena presented to you, you have to let in the agent. So what I typically advise companies to do is have a single point of contact. You don't want to just have anyone who happens to be at the door liaise with the ICE agent. So pick a specific person, or maybe two in case someone's out. Call your attorney immediately, in that case me, but other attorneys as well, and check the warrant or the subpoena. Was it signed by a judge? And does it have the name of your business on it, right? There are mistakes that can be made. So if it's valid, then there's nothing you can do but allow the ICE agents to go where they want freely, but you should walk with them and take notes as to what's happening. If there's any property damage, you may be entitled to some kind of redress. If they want to take any documents out of your company, you should make a note of everything that occurs. And you should always know your weak spots, right? If you are not protecting your company by having the I-9s, you should start having I-9s.
What's an I-9?
It's a form that the federal government requires when you onboard someone new, usually within the first 2 or 3 days, to ensure that they're allowed to work in the United States. So they show you a passport, they show you a visa, they show you something that says they're allowed to work here.
So for some industries, however, and I've been, like most people, you're reading up on this because it's in the news, and you're learning that industries such as agriculture, home building, hospitality have a large number, I don't know what the percentage is, it depends on the industry, I guess, very large numbers of undocumented workers as the backbone to the workforce. What do those people do? What do those companies do?
I think they're biting their fingernails and hoping for the best. I mean, there's nothing that really can be done. The law hasn't changed at all. It's just about enforcement, but the fines are pretty severe. Almost $3,000 for a single failure. Up to almost 6 if it's knowingly allowing undocumented workers to work for you, and then tens of thousands if it's ongoing. I think it's a problem that's not easily resolved, and there's no easy way to prepare if your workforce is wholly or mainly undocumented.
The fines are interesting, and thank you for putting that into context. I'm wondering can businesses seek compensation through insurance if there is an ICE raid? They can say that it's a business interruption, or you're not really seeing any of that happen?
No, typically insurances don't cover you for things that are done on purpose. And since there is this form called the I-9, which we previously mentioned, that's required, not having one is considered not having one on purpose. And so I don't believe it would be covered, even if there was such an insurance, which is a very interesting premise, actually.
So, again, just from the Bloomberg reporting here of these, the folks that get arrested by ICE agents.
Yes.
Do we know what happens to them?
I don't know, but I think that you should have an immigration attorney with whom you're comfortable working, and call that person immediately, because sometimes there are mistakes made and someone is documented, or maybe they're improperly documented in the workplace, but they're actually able to work. Sometimes when you're here on a visa, for example, your work visa expires. Typically, you have to get a new one, and you would fill out a new I-9, but that certainly falls through the cracks. And so those individuals should not be detained. They should not be deported. And if you're working with an immigration attorney, they can help you resolve that issue.
This, the Bloomberg News article out today about just these tactics and detain and deporting immigrants here in New York City says that there's an atmosphere of anxiety. The people don't know, is that van an ICE van? Is that person really from ICE? Are they a police officer? Are they potentially a criminal? In just the last 30 seconds, how are you kind of advising businesses on just understanding who is ICE and who is not?
Well, you should definitely check the ID of whoever is coming to the door. And if they don't have a subpoena or some kind of document that allows them to enter, you can politely tell them that, they're not allowed to move around the premises and just stay where they are. It's your decision at that point in time whether or not you want to let them in. But you also need to educate your employees. They should know what to do and what not to do. And, there are a lot of tough choices. It's impossible for me to tell somebody what they should and shouldn't do in that instant.
All right, it's a new environment for employers, employees alike in this new environment. Rania Sedham, managing partner at Sedham Law Group, giving some thoughts about how some of the retailers are dealing with this issue. Looking at the markets here, kind of red and green all over the place here. The S&P's off about 18 points here. But the Dow's up 386 points. That's 0.9%. On the flip side, NASDAQ is down 1%, 215 points. So not a lot of direction there. Looking at the Bloomberg Dollar Index, finally, a little bit of stability out there for the dollar, but it is down about 10%, the Bloomberg Dollar Index, from its high earlier this year. Keep an eye on that. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Emily Garfeo, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City. We're also streaming live on YouTube as well. The big take stories, you know we love them. These are the really interesting stories that a team of reporters will spend weeks on, really diving deep and getting some great news, well-sourced, really well-written, well-edited, and they're every single day. These are deep dive stories. Today is really fascinating. Talking about cybersecurity, and as it relates to the Treasury Department, apparently there's been some hacks there that are exposing a lot of data to some unsavory characters. Jordan Robertson joins us, cybersecurity reporter for Bloomberg News. He's in our London bureau, Queen Victoria Street, fantastic building in the city of London. Jordan, talk to us about your big take story. Trio of hacks at Treasury exposes pattern that has banks nervous here. What did you find?
Yeah, Paul, thanks for having me. So, yeah, our Bloomberg Big Take investigation today is about a series of really impactful cybersecurity attacks at the U.S. Treasury Department. There was a major attack in 2020, major attack in December, a major attack that was disclosed earlier this year, which news that was broken by our some of our Bloomberg colleagues. And the question we set out to answer was, why does the U.S. Treasury Department keep getting hacked, and why does it keep getting hacked so badly? Every organization faces attempted hacking attacks. Many organizations experience successful hacking attacks. It's always about the depth, though, of the intrusion. How far did the hackers get, and what did they get where they wanted to go? And in each of these three attacks, the hackers got about as far deep into the organization as you could imagine. And what we set out to answer was, how is that happening? And one of the answers we came up with is that the Treasury Department is one agency, but with the cybersecurity of it is run effectively as a series of like a half dozen different countries almost. These are subdivisions of the Treasury Department that have their own cybersecurity budget allocated by Congress. They have their own cybersecurity management. They have essentially their own IT infrastructure. And so what that means is some of these divisions have really good security. Some of these divisions don't have such good security. And this is an organization that I think a lot of people focus on because of the financial aspect of what Treasury does, but it does so much more than that. It investigates sanctions. It investigates terrorist financing. It does so much more than just kind of collect tax revenue, and issue Treasury bonds.
What does the reporting show about who's actually committing these hacks, and what exactly are the hacks on the Treasury?
So these are primarily nation-state attacks. So these are foreign governments attacking the U.S. Treasury Department. Again, there are so many different types of cyber attacks that organizations face. A lot of them are very low level and kind of easily deflected. Increasingly nowadays, we're seeing criminal groups, ransomware groups, affecting, hijacking networks and disrupting networks that way. That's not what we're talking about here with Treasury. We're talking about espionage. We're talking about kind of large, long-range cyber espionage, where these are foreign government-backed actors whose purpose is spying on data. So in the latest breach, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, that's the regulator of America's national banks, had its email system hacked for almost 2 years. So for almost 2 years, a cyber attack group, which hasn't been identified yet, was conducting very advanced cyber espionage on the emails and the communications of America's national bank regulator. That's not supposed to happen. It led to this really extraordinary series of events where several of the biggest U.S. banks, J.P. Morgan, BNY Mellon, and others, temporarily paused their electronic sharing of data with their regulator as a result of this breach. That's really extraordinary to have a regulated entity tell their regulator, your network is not safe enough for me to transmit data to. That was the incident that really compelled us to take a deeper look at this and try to figure out what's going on at Treasury. And I might add as well, this is at a time that Congress has allocated hundreds of millions of additional dollars to Treasury to enhance their cybersecurity. And they've spent that money. They have done things, but they have still not been effective fully in preventing these attacks.
I noticed in your reporting, Jordan, there's been a lot of, turnover or departures by senior cybersecurity people within the Treasury Department. Did that have any role in this, do we think?
That's right. So another interesting aspect of the reporting is that, Treasury's senior-most cybersecurity officials, from the chief technology officer and the chief information officer and all of their deputies, there have been, more than a half dozen of these individuals who have left Treasury since the Trump administration took office. A lot of the attention with Elon Musk and the Doge group has been focused, understandably, on the layoffs. This is not a case of layoffs. This is primarily a case of buyouts. So when the Doge group, has offered buyouts to large numbers of government employees, what's happened at Treasury is almost all of the senior-most cybersecurity officials have taken the buyout. And what we've been told is that, in fact, some of those individuals may have even supported the Doge effort and the idea that, consolidating Treasury's IT infrastructure would help improve security. But all of those folks are gone. So the cybersecurity leadership at Treasury is almost entirely gone, at a time where it's facing kind of unprecedented levels of cyber attacks and successful cyber attacks.
All right, Jordan, fascinating reporting with you and your team. Jordan Robertson, cybersecurity reporter for Bloomberg News, based in London. The big take story is trio of hacks at Treasury exposes pattern that has banks nervous. It's a big take. You can always find that on the Bloomberg terminal, or you can go to bloomberg.com/big takes. For our listeners in the U.S., a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM channel 121, access to the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day. Stay with us. Your top stories and global business headlines are coming up right now in a market that is decidedly mixed. The S&P down 12 points, the Dow up 420 points, the NASDAQ down 200 points. We'll have continued coverage throughout the afternoon. This is Bloomberg.
Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Matthew.
John Thune says he has the votes. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power as the Senate Majority Leader moves to a final up or down on President Trump's big, beautiful bill. This is about to happen. Your timing is impeccable. After an all-nighter vote-a-rama on Capitol Hill kept us up and saw the legislation change several times over. We're going to get the latest ahead from Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, who's on Capitol Hill, with insights from Mike Dorning from our Capitol Influence team. President Trump issuing a fresh warning to Elon Musk after a new round of attacks about this bill. We're going to explore all of this with Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow later this hour, and we'll be counting the votes as they come in with our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Gidi Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us for the hour as we watch this thing potentially cross the finish line together. Let's start on Wall Street now. Investors are watching this too, along with the help of Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on the markets from New York. Charlie, how's it look?
Right now, decidedly mixed, with the Dow surging by 1 full percentage points, up 441 right now. We have got the S&P down 10. Little change there, down 0.2%. NASDAQ, though, particularly hard hit today, down by 0.9%. We got NASDAQ down 185 points. Stocks have halted the rally as job openings lift bond yields. The 10-year 4.27%, the 2-year 3.78%. Gold is now surging $38 the ounce, $33.41 on the precious metal, up by 1.2%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.8%, $65.66 a barrel, and Bitcoin just above $106,000. Bitcoin right now down 1.5%. Fed Chair Jay Powell says he expects the impact of tariffs to show up in inflation data in coming months, while acknowledging that uncertainties remain. Powell's remarks, broadcast on Bloomberg Radio, came at the ECB Sintra Forum in Portugal.
We've always said that the timing, amount, and persistence of the inflation would be highly uncertain, and it's certainly improved that. So we're watching. We expect to see over the summer some readings, higher readings, but we're prepared to learn that it can be higher or lower or later or sooner than we'd expected.
Fed Chair Jay Powell at the ECB Sintra Forum in remarks broadcast on Bloomberg Radio. By the way, you can watch the full conversation on YouTube on the Bloomberg podcast channel. A headline right now on the Bloomberg Professional Service: Mamdani has won the New York City mayoral Democratic primary. Again, recapping a mixed day on Wall Street today with the S&P 500 index down 13 right now, down 0.2%. And Balance of Power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie, there we have it. Somebody ring the bell. They've done it in the United States Senate. 3 minutes past 12 o'clock Eastern time. And the bill, the big, beautiful bill, as the president calls it, has passed the upper chamber. Things started moving quickly as we were walking into the studio, but then again, it's noon. So we knew something was about to break. There we have it, 50-50. J.D. Vance has been up there for hours now, and the vice president was required to break the tie here. So the OBBBA, as I believe it's officially called, passes. You're looking at a live view of the Senate floor right now. I believe that's John Ossoff in the way.
The Senate, having been in continuous session since yesterday, the Senate will suspend for a prayer by the Senate chaplain.
All right, there we have it. It is done. It is complete. At least this chapter is. Of course, has to go back to the House now, where things could get to be a little bit more complicated. I'm glad we could experience this together. Welcome, by the way, to the Tuesday edition, if I didn't say so, on Balance of Power, Bloomberg Radio, Satellite Radio, Channel 121, Bloomberg Originals, and YouTube, where you're already dialed up. If not, search Bloomberg Business News Live, and we'll keep our eyes on the Senate floor for you here, and of course, everything that's going on here in Washington, D.C., with a stock market that's mixed up, and, well, I guess Washington is too. Apologies in advance. Everybody's peeking out of one eye today because we were all up all night. Most of the night. I finally gave in looking at the Bloomberg app and the DC chat that goes on with all of our reporters and editors here. I finally gave in around 2:30. I saw an AI component came out of the bill. Tried to go back to sleep. I saw Donald Trump truthing at Elon Musk. Tried to go back to sleep. Laura Davison pops in, our deputy bureau chief, at like 3:30 in the morning, signing in for duty. I knew I couldn't go back to sleep. 2 feet on the floor. This is about to happen. And there we have it. 50-50 once again, if you're just joining us on Bloomberg. The big, beautiful bill has passed the Senate. The president was asked about it on his way to Alligator Alcatraz. That's a whole other story going on. This is a new detention center for migrants that's opening in Florida. Donald Trump leaving the bubble as the votes are counted to touch down in Florida. And we might be hearing from him again in a moment. He was asked about the big, beautiful bill. Here he is.
I think so. I think it's going to be the greatest bill ever passed. No, we're not going to be playing with Medicaid. Only waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah, the Democrats have it wrong. Yeah. Waste, fraud, and abuse. In fact, if you look at what's gone on, we've gone way back. We take care of Medicaid. We take care of Medicare. They will blow Medicare and Medicaid because they have no idea what they're doing. Just like they don't have any idea what they did on the border, they have no idea. Medicaid is in big trouble with the Democrats.
So here we are now as we pick up the pieces, try to figure out what's come out of the bill, what's been tweaked, and what exactly the House of Representatives is going to be facing. Mike Dorning is with us from our Capital Influence team. Great to see you, sir.
Great to be here.
This is a good moment to have you with us after a votorama that was supposed to start at 9 in the morning yesterday. Didn't start till nighttime, and they ended up pulling an all-nighter anyway. I don't know what that exercise was exactly planned to be, but this is what we have. 26 hours. What did we get for it?
Well, all of that was because they needed the time to get people on board. These vote, as they always say, if you don't have the votes, you talk. When you have the votes, you vote. So once they got enough votes, that's when they voted. And they just barely got it. They got Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. And we're still looking at the particulars of the new version of the bill, which just came out as the senators were voting on it. So the actual language was only released during the vote. But basically, Alaska gets some leeway on the Medicaid cuts that other states don't get, and that helped bring in Lisa Murkowski. And also, we've heard from Senator Ed Markey that they took out this new excise tax they were going to put on solar and wind, which Lisa Murkowski was opposed to. But basically, they've insulated Alaska a bit from some of the Medicaid cuts, and they've given a little ground on the clean energy. They were going to eliminate the clean energy tax breaks, and they gave a little ground on that.
AI fell out of the bill. This is the Cruz amendment that would have regulated or prevented states from
essentially
regulating
was going to be
things.
a ban on state regulation initially for 10 years, and then he sort of bartered down to 5 years, but in the end they just took it out.
The Collins amendment to increase funding for rural hospitals. Interesting. They got the money for the hospitals, but the millionaire tax that was going to pay for it.
Yeah, they didn't do the millionaire tax.
So that's going to make this even more expensive.
It will, but the Senate version is a lot more expensive than the House version for various reasons. But interestingly, they had that amendment on the floor and it got voted down, but then they added it back in.
People will be asking questions about how that happened, right? There was some backroom dealing that took place.
You pay the price. I mean, and that's what Trump and Thune, they paid what they had to get the votes they needed and not one vote more.
Okay, so how's this going to land in the House now? Because you've already got members of the Freedom Caucus saying that this is different than what we made a deal on, so we're already a no. How many votes can Mike Johnson lose, and is it possible they pass this in the next 24 hours?
It's possible, because even though from the Freedom Caucus standpoint, it's worse than it was before in terms of, the extra debt the country takes on, but there are deeper spending cuts for Medicaid than there were in the House. So from the Freedom Caucus standpoint, that's a plus. If you're a swing state moderate, that might be a minus. And also they're going to lose one guy probably that had voted for it before, Nick Lolata from Long Island, because he said the salt deal wasn't good enough. But that said, you can bet that Donald Trump and those Republican House leaders are going to be twisting arms, breaking legs, whatever they have to do to get this done. And they'll be making promises about stuff that'll happen in the future, saying, hey, we're going to do this, we'll do that down the road for you. And they will really ratchet up the pressure because they want to get this done by July 4th. Not that it matters. You don't really need to get this done by July 4th.
But it looks like they might.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're a new president and your party is in control of Congress, you never have more power than you do coming in. And right now, Donald Trump won a bunch of victories in the Supreme Court. It's this moment to ratchet up the leverage and get it done. There's never going to be a time when he's more powerful than right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've made contact with Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, who's up on Capitol Hill right now that this has, in fact, passed the Senate, 50-50 until Vice President J.D. Vance weighed in the corridors of the Capitol, the halls of power. We turn to Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall right now. What's going on, Tyler, and what's the feeling now that this passed?
Yeah, hey, Joe. Well, I think there's a sense of relief up here on Capitol Hill. We're hearing that the senators are starting to trickle out of that room, albeit slowly, though, considering that this was a more than 27-hour vote-a-rama, set all different types of records, including the most amendments ever introduced during one of these voting sprees. And I just wanted to point out the senators that did end up voting for this. Of course, we know who didn't: Tom Tillis, Susan Collins, Rand Paul. But it's interesting to see that most of those fiscal hawks ended up getting on board with this plan. Now, the last-minute developments, as you were just talking about with Bloomberg's Mike Dorning, include cutting this controversial tax when it comes to solar and wind energy projects, also revising a food aid carve-out for Alaska. And I bring that up because, of course, that got Senator Lisa Murkowski on board. And it was interesting because one of our reporters caught up with Rand Paul after the vote, who said in the end, they added more subsidies to the bill for Alaska to get Murkowski's vote. Of course, he didn't vote for this because he wanted to see more spending cuts, also wouldn't vote for anything that lifts the debt ceiling in such a significant way. But that brings me to the next point, which is that when it does come to those fiscal hawks, perhaps this bill could face a little bit more pressure when it gets to the House chamber. We are expecting a critical vote in the Rules Committee later on today. It is expected to pass, but Joe, what we're really watching for is how the debate is going to unfold once this bill gets to the full House floor, whether or not those House Freedom Caucus members really dig in their feet for more substantial changes.
Yeah, this is fascinating. That Rules Committee hearing ought to be a doozy. Tyler, just procedurally here, it sounds like the Senate did jam the House. They cannot make any changes on this bill or it has to go back, right? So it's a take it or leave it situation.
Right, exactly. This was designed not to essentially ping-pong between the two chambers, which is why I'm watching really closely how the administration and the White House gets involved here, because, Joe, you'll recall, once this had passed the House back in May, House Speaker Mike Johnson came out and he said that he thought some of his hardline members could get on board if they were offered some sort of executive orders out of this White House. So we're going to be watching really closely as President Trump does work the phones, makes, of course, his primary challenges on different social media platforms. If we do get any firmer sense on whether or not there's been commitments to perhaps do another reconciliation package down the line, though it's hard to imagine how that would get done, or if there would be some sort of revenue raiser or cost-saving executive order that could come out of the administration.
All right, stand by, Tyler, for a moment. This is great reporting as we learn real time exactly what went on with this Senate vote. Mike Dorning, the majority leader, is speaking. John Thune hopeful the House can pass the tax bill after the Senate passage. We knew that he was in touch with Speaker Johnson. Do we assume this is going to pass, or do we have a problem in the House?
There's a potential problem, and it could, slip past the July 4th deadline. Remember, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter.
They can't change a lot.
But they want it done by July 4th, and that, although it's just because Trump says so, that lets them put a lot of pressure on people to cave now. And I think that they will put that pressure on, make those promises like Tyler was talking about, to get them on board now. They're on the cusp of the legislative centerpiece for Trump's agenda. He just wants to get this done while it can get done. Don't wait. That's the old thing in Washington. When you can get it done, get it done. Don't wait.
I want to just also remind everybody that this is not, you're seeing on your screen and hearing us talk about this passing the Senate. This is only the next leg in the process. This is going to go to a House vote that we're talking about here with Mike Gorning that would be final passage. Then the president presumably signs this on the 4th of July. Do we have a sense of what went on with the idea of a wraparound amendment? There was going to be a final vote that brought this back closer to the House. Did that happen, or did he decide?
There was a wraparound amendment. It didn't bring it back that much closer to the House, but that's where some of those tweaks, like taking out that excise tax on solar and wind, the fix on the food aid so that Alaska's food aid doesn't get cut as much as some other places, things like that all happened in that wraparound amendment, which we were just getting as they were voting on it. So trying to report out what's really in there is still going on.
I'd love to go back to Tyler Kendall, if Tyler's standing by here, with the idea of next steps. Tyler, have House members already been told to get back to town? They are technically on recess here, right?
Yeah, I believe they have been actually, because one of our colleagues caught up with Chip Roy. I'm trying to find it in our chat here, but he did appear to gaggle with some reporters on the House side. He said he doesn't have a bill yet, so he can't give full comment on exactly what he's going to be against, but he did point to concerns about the buyouts of Alaskans, or the buyouts of Alaskans, he said, apparently taking issue with the provision that ultimately helps to get Lisa Murkowski on board. We are watching those more vocal members, particularly when it does come to the likes of Chip Roy, also Ralph Norman. Of course, one whose vote we're not expecting to be swayed, Joe, is Thomas Massey, who has really come into the limelight in really recent days, considering that President Trump had officially, his political arm had officially launched a super PAC into primarying him. But then we got the headline out of Elon Musk last night that he does intend to throw some campaign funding behind Thomas Massey, as it appears that debate has really put Republicans here on Capitol Hill between President Trump and the largest U.S. political donor of the 2024 cycle, who gave more than $290 million to both the White House, but also those down-ballot races.
Yeah, this feud has lit up again. We're going to talk to Ed Ludlow about that in a bit. We just got a statement from the Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson says the House will work quickly to pass one big, beautiful bill enacting President Trump's full America First agenda by the 4th of July, referring to the American people, giving a clear mandate after 4 years of what he calls Democrat failure. What do you think? The president does this while the fireworks are going off in Washington?
You could time the fireworks right after he signs it.
Press the button.
They had told the Senate Republicans to be back tomorrow, so they're going to start work on it tomorrow.
So House Republicans will be on the floor
tomorrow, and the Rules Committee's meeting this afternoon.
Gotta love having Mike Gorning and Tyler Kendall in the clutch. Thank you so much, Mike, from our Capital Influence team. The bill has passed the Senate. Now it goes back to the House. Stay with us on Bloomberg.
It's 12:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long. Here at Bloomberg, we've got the Dow Jones Industrial Average trading close to session highs. What a rally there, up 450 points right now. First trading day of the second half of the year. That is a gain of 1% on the Dow. S&P, though, in the red. A rally that drove stocks to records, losing steam. Bond yields rising right now. The S&P down 9, dropped there at 0.1%. And NASDAQ down 165, lower by 0.8%. The Bloomberg Mag 7 Index hit hard, down 1.7%. The 10-year, 4.26%. The 2-year right now, 3.77%. Gold now surging $36 the ounce, up 1.1%. 33.39 on the precious metal. And West Texas Intermediate crude, 65.66 a barrel, up 0.8%. Hershey says it will remove synthetic dyes from its snacks by the end of 2027. The latest in a string of major food companies have announced similar moves. Hershey shares are surging now by 7.1%. And some of the other stories we're following: upstart Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani clinched the Democratic nomination for mayor of New York City, extending his lead to 12 points in the primary over Andrew Cuomo and raising new doubts about the viability of the former governor running as a third-party candidate. According to the latest numbers from the City Board of Elections, the ranked choice tabulations showed Mamdani with a 56% of the vote after lower-ranking candidates were eliminated. Recapping, stocks are declining. S&P down 0.1%. The Dow, however, up by 1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcasts. And the balance of power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here is Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie. Good to see Charlie Pellet as ever. And we'll be back with another update on the markets shortly here as we talk politics on Balance of Power. Live from Washington. Thanks for joining us on the Tuesday edition. If you're just coming along, we have big news. The Senate passed the bill. It happened right after high noon. 12:03 p.m. Washington time, 50-50, the tiebreaker, courtesy J.D. Vance, who made his way to the Hill earlier today. So a little bit of change took place in the vote-a-rama over the course of the night. They did pull an all-nighter, 26-hour-long affair. They got in there at 9 o'clock in the morning yesterday when we did our late edition of Balance of Power last evening, live from the U.S. Senate. That hadn't even started the vote-a-rama yet. 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, we saw updates over the course of the evening that brought us here now. Lisa Murkowski, the last to turn in favor of the bill. Now it goes to the House, of course, as we continue the schoolhouse rock. Elon Musk, not liking this whole show. If you listen to this program, you know he's not a fan of the bill, and that was the genesis of his big breakup and then feud with President Trump, which we kind of thought had died out. It seemed like people were getting along until yesterday. This also happened last night. Elon Musk vowing to make sure every member of Congress who campaigned on a platform of reducing government spending be voted out of office, primary, with his financial help. Quote, they will lose their primary next year if it is the last thing I do on this earth. Donald Trump, of course, listening, gets on Truth Social with a big warning. He writes, Elon Musk knew before he so strongly endorsed me for president that I was strongly against the EV mandate. There's the truth if you're on YouTube. It's ridiculous, he says. It was always a major part of my campaign. Now, it gets tough as you scroll down here. Elon may get more subsidy than any human being in history by far. And without subsidies, he writes, Elon would probably have to close up shop and head back to South Africa. No more rocket launches, satellites, or electric car production. And our country, he says, would save a fortune. Perhaps the Doge should take a good hard look at this, he says. Big money to be saved. Echoing these remarks as he made his way out of town to Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. Listen to Donald Trump.
We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. I think what's going to happen is Doge is going to look at Musk. And if Doge looks at Musk, we're going to save a fortune. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't think you should be playing that game with me.
Thank you for your attention to this matter. Glad to say Ed Ludlow is joining us. It's always a good day when our friend Ed comes in from San Francisco, and for good reason today, the co-host of Bloomberg Tech and a friend of Balance of Power. Ed, are we serious here? The monster is going to come eat Elon? What does he have to worry about? Is this real?
So I think what the president's referring to, and it's a statement that he kind of said originally outside of the White House and then reiterated in Florida, is alluding to across Elon Inc., Tesla, SpaceX, and other parts of Elon's empire, he has historically benefited from grants, subsidies, but also direct contracts with the federal government. You'll remember when you and I last discussed this issue, you can quantify it. It's about $25 billion to $40 billion, but it is across subsidies, grants, and contracts. And I think what the president's kind of alluding to here is saying, well, if Doge was to review that, remember Elon Musk kind of was the founding, one of the founders of Doge and has since departed after his term ended. That's what would be reviewed. But I find the politics so interesting because it all centers around the bill. And actually what the president is saying, direct and indirect to Musk, on the issue of EV subsidy is not what Elon Musk is saying back to him. Elon Musk is very worried about national debt.
So you got a nice rocket company there. Be ashamed if something happened to it. Is kind of the message. What would this actually mean for Elon Musk if the Doge did plug you into the hard drive here? Find, I guess, examples of waste, fraud, and abuse. Are we seriously talking about cutting contracts, knowing how much the government needs Elon Musk?
I think it's important to be honest with the audience. Don't actually know the answers to that. What I reflect on is that, and what we've reported is that lots of the individuals inside of Doge are Elon Musk's allies and confidants. They are people that he convinced to get on board with the project. The other point is just the reality operationally of what our domestic space industry looks like. SpaceX dominates globally. The vast majority, about 85 to 90% of payload to orbit, human or otherwise. NASA is highly reliant on SpaceX to get human beings to and from ISS. The Department of Defense and the Pentagon are very reliant on SpaceX to put defense apparatus in the form of satellites into orbit. And so that's the reality, but I think that's the right interpretation that the president's alluding to here, that Doge would say, well, look at the value of these contracts. Could we save money somewhere? Is there a corporate alternative to SpaceX is probably the bigger next question.
Wow. Tesla, meantime, stock's down $14, almost 5%. Is Elon Musk really going to start his own political party? I mean, how serious are we about the next chapter for him? He's going to start giving money to Tom Massey, primarying everybody Republican who votes for this bill, start the, what is it, the America Party? What does he have planned?
Well, in my career and experience of covering Elon Musk, which includes the period prior to the November election and until present day, Elon Musk, particularly in the political domain, he has put his money where his mouth is, right? And this is why I brought up what the two men are saying to each other. Musk's grievance has been quite consistent. He's very worried about national debt, and he doesn't like the makeup of the bill. The president has been saying that Musk's issue is EV subsidies, but to his credit, Elon Musk has also been consistent on this issue. He has argued and maintained for quite some time that if America were to do away with direct-to-consumer EV subsidies in particular, those that were provided for in the Inflation Reduction Act, it would be to Tesla's benefit, because compared to other American automakers and companies, Tesla's cost of doing business is much lower, it has much more pricing power, and so if you got rid of subsidies, it would still be ultra competitive. He has been consistent on that. But on the political domain, part of his argument was in the run-up to November, he campaigned for the president on the idea that the deficit and the national debt is something that this administration would look at. And indeed, in several posts over recent months, that idea has come back up. And that seems to be what Musk is upset about.
Great to see you, and I appreciate you coming in. Ed Ludlow, I know we're going to talk about this again, so let's stay close. Watch from Bloomberg Tech, frankly, all day and night on Bloomberg TV and radio. Tom Massey, Matt reminds us, Tom Massey drives a Tesla. And actually tweeted his off-grid home runs on a wrecked Model S Tesla car battery that he repurposed. I don't know, maybe this is just a big reunion waiting for all these guys. Breaking news coming out of New York today. I want to mention this before we get to our panel this hour, because we have a lot to dissect with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. The final vote is in on the New York Democratic mayoral primary. I know you're saying, Joe, we already did this. President was just calling him a communist this morning. Let's bring in Laura Namias, Bloomberg, New York City and state reporter, who is all over this ranked choice election when we talked about it. Was this last week or the week earlier? Laura, I'm starting to forget.
It was last week when the first round of votes in New York's ranked choice primary came in, and today we got to see what the rest of the vote.
That's not bad. 1 week, right? We thought this was going to be, what, it was 2 weeks last time around. So break it for us. The redhead on the terminal, Laura. The same guy who already thought won is the official winner.
Right. So what we saw today is that Zoran Mamdani significantly widened his lead over Andrew Cuomo in the final results, which will be certified in a couple of weeks. But he is now leading Andrew Cuomo by 12 points in this primary. That is an absolutely decisive victory. We knew that he was likely going to be the winner after last week when he was leading Cuomo by 7 points, a result that nobody expected. Everyone thought it might be close, but there had only been one official poll showing Mamdani winning. Turns out that this electorate was not captured by polls, and Mamdani is the breakaway winner. For contrast, in 2021, the first year that the city used this kind of ranked choice voting mechanism, Eric Adams emerged victorious after 8 rounds of voting by less than 1 percentage point over Catherine Garcia. Came in second place. Andrew Cuomo is losing by 12 points to Zoran Mamdani.
Amazing context. Cuomo's going to be on the ballot still either way, right? So is he actually going to run a campaign as an independent or something else?
So we're talking to people within the Cuomo universe right now, trying to figure out what his plans are. He has not decided whether or not to drop out of the race. His campaign said last week that he would be looking at the numbers to try to decide whether or not he had a pathway forward. It's unclear what these numbers are going to mean, but people close to him are already pointing out that despite the fact that he lost this race, he got more overall votes than Eric Adams did in 2021. So that might give you a hint as to what they're thinking for the general election in November.
So could we still have a four-way, Mamdani, Cuomo, Adams, Sliwa?
Yes, and another candidate, Jim Walden, who's running as an independent. We're possibly looking at a five-way general election. Very competitive for the first year. Yeah.
Boy, I should say so. Laura, thank you so much for letting us know. It's actually done. It's signed, sealed, delivered here. Bloomberg's New York City state reporter, Laura Namias. Yes, Mamdani wins the Democratic primary. We're going to assemble our panel next. Donald Trump talking again from the Alligator Alcatraz Detention Center in Florida. We'll talk about how they came up with that, by the way. You know, they're selling Alligator Alcatraz merch. I can't even get Bloomberg merch. But I'm willing to pay for it. Donald Trump says he thinks the bill will pass more easily in the House. We'll see about that. We're going to take Rick Davis's and Jeannie Shanzano's temperature on this. Bloomberg Politics contributors. Coming up next, we'll assemble our political panel straight ahead, right here on Bloomberg.
12:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We begin with a headline involving Iran. French President Emmanuel Macron has agreed to coordinate the approach on Iran with Vladimir Putin. Macron and Putin spoke for the first time since 2022. A story we are monitoring here at Bloomberg. We've got the Dow surging off session highs right now, still up by 423 points, up by 1%. A decidedly mixed market though, with the S&P 500 index retreating from a record now down 61.97, a drop there of 0.1%, while Nasdaq is down 144 points for the Nasdaq Composite Index, down 0.7%. A rally that drove stocks to records, lost steam, bond yields rose as an unexpected increase in job openings dimmed the outlook for Fed rate cuts. The 10-year now at 4.26%, but the 2-year 3.77%. Gold up $39 the ounce to $33.42, up 1.2%, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.9%, 65.71 a barrel. We've got Tesla shares now down by 4.4%. President Trump is threatening to withdraw government subsidies from Elon Musk's companies and examine the billionaire's immigration status after the Tesla CEO ratcheted up his criticism of the president's tax and spending bill. So potentially, what is at stake for Musk and his empire? Ed Ludlow is the co-host of Bloomberg Tech. He was a guest moments ago right here on Bloomberg Balance of Power.
It's about $25 billion to $40 billion, but it is across subsidies, grants, and contracts. And I think what the president's kind of alluding to here is saying, well, if Doge were to review that, remember Elon Musk kind of was the founding, one of the founders of Doge and has since departed after his term ended. That's what would be reviewed.
Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has assumed oversight of sales in Europe and the United States. Tesla right now down by 4.3%. Recapping, S&P lower down 0.1%. Just part of the market story today with the Dow surging 0.9%, up 407 points. And Balance of Power continues right now. Back to go to Washington once again. The host here is Joe Matthew.
Okay, Charlie, thanks so much. Watching Wall Street for us here on Balance of Power, live from Washington, where we have just heard from the majority whip in the House. Yeah, Tom Emmer says there will be a vote tomorrow in the House, following passage today in the Senate. If you're just joining us, they got it done in the upper chamber. I'm guessing no one has slept yet. Remember the vote around started at 9 o'clock yesterday morning? It didn't really. They ended up tooling around procedural votes all day into the evening when the vote around actually began. And just after 12 noon,
On this vote,
we got a tally on this
50. The nays are 50. The Senate being evenly divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative. The bill as amended is passed.
That's the Vice President. J.D. Vance was required to make it happen with a 50-50 vote here and the tiebreaker. If you're with us on YouTube, we see some very sleepy people milling around. And so there we have it. The big, beautiful bill, or at least the version it took over the course of last evening, has now passed the Senate, and it goes back to the House in a slightly different form. And there are a lot of concerns about exactly how this is going to work. If you ask members of the House Freedom Caucus, they're deeply worried about this. It cuts $1.5 trillion in exchange for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, which is $500 billion short of the savings that some of the fiscal hawks said they needed to see to get to a yes. But now again, Tom Emmer says we're going for it tomorrow. The next 24 hours are going to be critical if they want to meet the president's July 4th deadline. And I think that Rick and Jeannie will both tell you that doesn't need to happen. But the optics here are important for this president, and so we should assemble our political panel. With us the day after, Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis. Jeannie is Senior Democracy Fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. Rick is partner at Stoneport Capital, a Republican strategist. And so I'll start with you, Rick. John Thune got it done. What does it say about the leader and the way this all played out in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, there were a lot of doubters last night at about 2 o'clock in the morning. As you were watching, it sounds like, from your living room, as to whether or not they could get that one extra vote. I mean, it was really a battle of deals that Thune was trying to articulate between Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. turns out Lisa got a better deal. Susan didn't. She voted against it because she feels like she's going to lose 5 hospitals in her state. And Murkowski got the SNAP provision she wanted and wound up in. But it was a horse trade, and nobody really knew for sure until this morning whether or not that deal with Murkowski was going to stick. So no profiles encouraged by these Republicans who thought that the $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts were going to be a problem. So we'll see. Now they move on to the House. House will pass this, and they're going to have to campaign on this in a year from now in midterms. It'll be interesting to see how the public reacts.
That's right. A lot of folks referred to Tom Tillis actually as a profile encourager. Of course, he did vote no, and it will mean the end of his Senate career. Jeannie, we just heard from Maya McGinnis at the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. She's going to be with us on the late edition of Balance of Power. Her note with the headline, Senate jumps off a budget cliff on reconciliation. Is that how you see it?
It absolutely is. As Rick just described, we were waiting all night to see if Lisa Murkowski could get bought off by a carve-out for Alaska, which she got, and the other 48 states, because Hawaii goes with Alaska as non-contiguous, will have to pay for these Medicaid cuts. So you've got 17, 18 million people losing health care. You've got, as Maya's talking about, an enormous addition to debt and deficit. And this is all the paper tax cuts that skew to the very wealthy. And so this is absolutely a perilous moment for the health of the nation. It's a perilous moment for the financial well-being of the nation. And GOP members know that. They are absolutely aware of this, but the pull of MAGA, the pull of Trumpism has won out in the Senate, and it's likely to win out again in the House, because as much as the House Freedom Caucus likes to cry foul, they seem to go along. And so you've got to give it to Donald Trump. He's been able to pull out, at least in the Senate now, an enormous victory. And so that is a huge deal for him, and we have to wait and see where it goes in the House. But all bets are this thing gets through either before July 4th or in the next few hours afterwards.
We all remember the Cornhusker kickback, right? Ben Nelson back in the Obamacare debate. Rick, you were working in the Senate back then. How would you catalog this effort when it comes to backroom deals that Americans wake up and say, well, what happened? And who voted on it?
Yeah, we're a long way from those fiscal days of, trying to put pressure on people not to do these carve-outs, pork barrels back. And that's exactly, look, you always had to cut deals in the Senate and the House to get votes, right? That's, as long as there's been those chambers, there have been those deals. I would say that this is the first time I can recall so many people having a different version of the facts to work from. This idea that you can call expiring tax cuts somehow policy and not have it graded against you as you factor for the deficit is nuts, because the deficits are the deficits. And so we just added $1 trillion a year in interest on the national debt, and I think all of these guys, there's no deal that can be cut that's going to put that thing in the rearview mirror. So I'm not surprised by the deals. It's obviously had to get them because the underlying bill wasn't what they wanted. But at the end of the day, what I think everyone's going to remember from this is that at a time when everyone agrees that we are spending too much money in Washington, D.C., we just spent significantly amount more.
Rick Davis says pork barrel is back. Jeannie, that's something to say in the middle of this conversation when this was supposed to be an effort to cut government spending. You know what Elon Musk says? If it's the last thing he ever does on this earth, he says, he'll be helping to pay for the primary challenges against Republicans who voted for this bill. Before we get that far, though, we've got to go to the House, and there's no guarantee this is going to pass tomorrow, is there?
There is no guarantee. It is likely that they are able to keep this bill on track and pass it. We don't know when. You just look at recent history. Every time somebody like Chip Roy has gone out very passionately and spoken out against a bill, he has caved. And what's astonishing to me is I was rereading Josh Hawley's op-ed in the New York Times. What was it we talked about it a couple of months ago? Saying that these Medicaid provisions would destroy the party. And yet somehow he found his way to vote yes. And that's what seems to have happened in all of these cases. And another really astonishing part of where we are today, you go back.
Itu aja ya. Iya. Banyak. Apa? Ini banyak. All in. Powell bilang apa bang? Suku bunga di-cut kah? Aku pengen sing guys.